that our city attorney, Adam Albritton, is with family. His father is gravely ill in Gainesville, and so that's why he's not here today. But because this is a workshop, this is simply discussion. There's no action being taken today, so we are really okay without Adam being with us. If you have questions as we're discussing this morning that might be of a legal nature, just make a note of those so that we can present those as we go forward. So at this time, we are opening, this is a workshop. We got into some discussion at the last city commission about the rebuild, what direction that we wanted to go, if we wanted to stay in the same direction, if we wanted to consider other directions. And so it was decided that we would have this workshop this morning. And so at this point, what I would like to do is ask the city manager if she would like to make any comments as we begin the opening of this. And as we go forward, then there'll be time for each commissioner to speak regarding their thoughts. I certainly have many of my own, but I will, since I'm the chairperson of the meeting, I'm going to try to be very polite and hold mine back and let everyone else talk for a great deal of the workshop, and then I'll maybe finish up with some comments of my own. So, Mrs. Gaynor, thank you very much. I'll let you lead off.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Mayor. We've been on this track for several months now, working with different design architects, and part of our process has been to see what what kind of progress we could make just by doing some of the exercises that we've gone through. So we have met with DAG, who is responsible for the sports complex, the ball fields, the concession stands, all of those areas are really out there at the sports complex, and how we can pull that entire project back together and stay within those guidelines. But we know that there are some financial restraints. And one of the things that is happening now is that we're finally getting ready. We're seeing money come through FEMA. We're finally getting some cost estimates that are firm enough that we can look and see the kind of funds that we're going to get through FEMA. And then as we wait for the communication with our insurance company is where we're going to go with them. Currently, I gave to the commission kind of where we were financially, what we received in thus far, and thus far I just kind of talked to the commissioners about this, is that we were steadily receiving some money in from the insurance company, and then we kind of hit a dead wall, and now we're in a dispute, but we continually just receive money in from FEMA in our rebuild process. So that's helped us to kind of put some thought processes on where we go with just thinking about the sports complex and all of the projects that are involved with that. We know that we need a gym, offices. We need to put the fields back to form. We know what we need in terms of giving the residents the quality of life that they want and deserve at a sports complex. But we also have to build what we can afford. And so with those numbers coming back from FEMA, it has put us kind of where we need to be. And looking at the structural reports, I've asked the design team to go back and look at the structural reports, look at the current building to see how we can utilize what's there, add on to it, and be able to give a building that and a place that can still represent the quality of life by and also thinking for the future. And so they have been working on that side of it. On the building side, there are several buildings that are damaged and that were damaged, and we've been working with Florida Architect on that. what is it that we need, how much of it we need, and where does it need to be has really been our theme process of where we're going to go at this point. But those buildings do include Fire Station Number 1, they include Public Works, they include the library, they include Senior Center, they include Old City Hall. We need to build the police station, chamber, and new City Hall, all of that, the rebuild of the city. We have to remember that we are probably the only city that every single one of our buildings were literally destroyed. And it's going to take a lot for us to get back to where we need to be to rebuild. And we're going to have to just be mindful of that. So in that process, again, we're finally getting some cost analysis from FEMA that will help us put in perspective what will come from them. And then as we move forward with our communication and our team attorneys with our insurance company, what we will get from them as well. But in the meantime, we are at a point that we do, and I think we've been very frugal and saving money, the reimbursements that we've gotten from FEMA. I think one of the things that Mayor implemented right after some things happened to the city is that we put together an account where when we got insurance money, it would go into the account and it would not be touched. And that is what has happened. When we receive FEMA reimbursements, we would pay off our bills, and then what was left would go into that insurance account and would not be touched. And that is what has happened. And so at this point, we are at a stage where we have the money to rebuild, a little bit over $18 million, and anticipating another $5 million to come in either through FEMA, because the projects that we're looking at now are 428 projects. What does that mean? 428 projects mean that we agree on this cost, that it's going to cost us to rebuild this particular building. We agree on it, the city agrees on it, and then that is what's put into the FEMA document. And then once we both agree upon that, two things can happen. We can draw down that money and we have 90 days to spend half of that money that has been drawn down. We have 90 days to do that. Or if we spent the money for a 428 project, we send in our invoices and we get that money drawn down to pay back the city. Either way, that's a win-win situation for us because we know that with each of these projects, we're going to spend the money. So we're in a better shape to budget and to look at what we can spend and not spend. So these 428 projects are really, really good for the city because one of the great things about them is if you don't use all of the money from one particular project, you can designate that money to go to another project within the city once you have closed out the project you were working on. So if we have $1.1 million and we use $500,000 of it, we have $600,000 left that we can put on another project. And we had a really great meeting with FEMA last week and KPMG about how to utilize those dollars. So I wanted to just give you an update on what we see in the future in terms of finances coming through, and welcome to ask any questions. I do see some of the architects are here to answer any questions if possible. So today I'm really looking forward to the commission kind of giving us some direction, how much we want to spend, where we want to go, and then go back and try to meet those needs and those numbers. I hope I didn't take too long.
Not at all. Thank you, Mrs. Gaynor. Are there, at this point in time, then I would just open the floor for discussions, proposals, comments, disagreements, whatever you'd like to bring up. Here we go.
Mayor, if you don't mind. Vicki, I've got a question for you. Okay, so on the piece of paper you gave us with estimated building costs, your proposal is 19, just shy of $20 million. We've got 18 million in the restoration account, so that's an extra 2 million more than in the restoration account. In our discussion the other day, we had talked, and the numbers you gave me was looking like we were going to have about 23 million to spend. Of that 23 million, I think you were implying that you would like to have a little bit of a buffer left in case the numbers don't come back where they want. If that's the case, I mean, are we talking? Because you're looking at a $3 million buffer from the numbers you gave me versus what we're willing to spend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My concern is some of your choices of cost. I wonder if we can build the library for $545,000. The senior center, I get that number because we're doing a lot of that work in house, and I know Mr. Footen is here, and I do appreciate him and his staff because if y'all haven't been over to looked at, y'all need to go check it out. They're pouring the footers right now for the mezzanine. I mean, I'm continually impressed with these guys' work and the stuff that they do. In fact, I almost fell in one of the holes where the footer was 'cause I wasn't expecting it to be there. And then also, of course, the recreational sports complex. I worked hard on trying to get those numbers down, and so did you, and we couldn't get the numbers where they needed to be, and that's why we brought it back to the commission and said, y'all tell us what you want to do. The $6 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but I want y'all to remember that we spent $3.5 million doing the five fields at King Griffin. These fields at the sports complex are for the older kids, not the high school kids, so they're bigger fields, more sod, more fencing, but also the 3.5 included the expansion of the splash pad. So we need to look at those numbers. I question whether $6 million is going to be enough to build the gym and put the fields back in. So it may be a thing where we may need to look at doing it in phases, decide whether we put the gym in first and don't do the fields or do the fields. For me, this is, we can sit here and kick the can down the road as long as we want and not come up numbers. But if we don't get some hard numbers for these guys, we're never going to get started. And I have had discussions about the city hall and PD and chambers, and I went through those numbers with y'all at the last commission meeting, but I also want to make sure that y'all are aware, if you didn't write them down, the beach built a new city hall with chambers in 2016 with a 20,000 square foot building at $4.6 million. Now, I know that was pre-hurricane, so we would need to add a hurricane value to that. So, obviously that's going to cost us more. They built the PD after the hurricane. They built a 14,000 square foot building at $3.7 million, including all the site work. So, I would think 11 million should be able to build those. I don't want to see us reduce that number, in my opinion, because I think that the city needs to be proud of what we build. But that's just my initial thoughts, and I'd like to pass it back and let everybody else talk, ma'am. Thank you.
I had one comment or question I'd like to ask because I think I know the answer to it already. But the beach buildings that you're referring to, they were not hardened buildings, though, right? They were not.
Police department.
If my understanding now, this is coming from the police chief, the police department is hardened to 148 miles an hour.
But not the city hall and public works.
The public works building wasn't included in what I did, but
public works is part of their police department, though, is it not?
Public works is the building in front, and then the city hall's beside, and the PD's by itself.
But it is part of that complex, though, right there, is what I'm saying.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
But this number was just the PD building.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, I'd like to get that information because when I checked, my information was that it was not hardened to what we were talking about because 140 wouldn't have helped us with what we had here. So.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, again, that's, whatever this commission decides, but they did tell me that it was hardened to 148 mile an hour winds and actually has a double roof system. It has two roofs on it.
Okay, good to know.
So if it loses the first roof, it's got a secondary roof that's supposed to keep it from getting water in the building.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
I have a question, I guess, for Florida Architects and
Go ahead.
with our city manager together on that, because I remember when we first started meeting back, 6-7 months ago, lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry, but it's still not picking you up on the.
Yeah, I know it's. Am I good, Graham? Because I'm pretty close. Okay, there we go. All right. So when we first started having meetings 6 or 7 months ago, I know that we did instruct you guys. So in all fairness, we said, look, let's put down our dream, so to speak, to an extent, everything we want, and then let's start narrowing it down, right? And then we were supposed to have gone to the departments and kind of narrowed it down. My assumption is everybody liked the goodies and nothing was really narrowed down that much, which is one of the reasons our cost was so high, which is understandable. I mean, that's human nature to see nice stuff and want it, right? I agree with Dan. I think, first off, we have to get to a compromise of where we want to be on a square foot price, actually, and then we can build out from there. But without having kind of an idea of where we want our costs to start, and I understand square foot price changes. It's not going to be the same as the beach. I understand that, but we can make it the same if we change our size or we alter it or we can get our numbers where we want it. In other words, so I think this commission, this board needs to kind of come up with a range of dollars in which we want to spend or be comfortable with per square foot in order to rebuild these buildings. I think that has to be our starting point. I don't know any other way, really, but that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And without sounding terrible, I just would like to say that I never instructed any architects to build my dream, so I want to correct that. I didn't do that. I wasn't on that committee.
Correct. Yes, you
Thank
weren't
you.
there, Mayor. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead, Commissioner Perno.
I just want to piggyback off of Commissioner Aldridge, and when Commissioner Russell was talking, the police station in 2016 would have been $232.50 a square foot, and the city hall would have came in at $262.91 in 2019. As far as I'm concerned, a fair value or a fair thing to give people to shoot for, and to stand by our taxpayers as far as being frugal would be probably about $300 a square foot. If we could start there, maybe at a budget price of $300 a square foot for our city buildings, that might put things in line. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead, please.
I do want to note that those prices did not include furniture and fixtures. That was just the shell, and obviously we're going to have to buy furniture too. So I just want to make sure that in full disclosure, you know everything that I know.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Mayor. You know me. I don't want to spend any money we don't have to spend. I personally feel that fancy is not important. Functional is important. Wind is important, for safety. And I don't think we should spend money we don't have. So if what we have is it the 18? That's what we actually have. Then that's what I think we should spend. And then I also have a question here about, for example, animal shelter, and this could just be a numbers question, but animal shelter, we have $400,000. What's left to be done there? I mean,
The inside of the animal shelter, there's
Okay.
a lot to be done there. And in order to bring all animals back, we need to be up to standard. We also have to replace, and I think it is a cremation incinerator, whatever. Yeah. We have to replace that. And right now, I mean, just alone, that's running almost $50,000-$60,000 by itself. And but there's a lot of work to be done there in terms of rearranging the way that animal shelter looks, so that our residents can come in and visit with their dogs and our animals there without walking through some of those very sensitive areas they should not be walking through.
is it still, are we tearing that whole building down and starting from scratch?
No, we are gutting a lot of that. We've already put a roof on it ourselves, and that is thanks to Joe's guys there. Right now, the cost estimate that we have for just on the FEMA alone, it was a little bit over $400,000, but that included the roof. So we took the roof off because we've already done that side of it, and really it's just the inside. And I can have Joe come up and speak a little bit more about it if you like.
No, I've been inside. I
Yeah.
just didn't know if that's what was being done for that amount of money. Okay. And what are we doing at Public Works? That whole building coming down?
No, not the whole building, but there are a lot of things within that building that need to be replaced. Here's one of the things for Public Works as well. We have a lot of staff that come in and out of that. They don't even have anywhere to eat lunch. They have no break room. There was a lot of damage to, of course, the roof. Some of that we put in and we just kind of fixed for now. But there are some other areas in there that need to be attended to. And again, we're going off of the numbers where I have in front of me the entire damage list for animal shelter, and I'll be happy to share this with you. This is just to give you an idea, and I want everyone to see this. This is just the animal shelter, all the damage and stuff that needs to take place there, and you're talking about 7 pages of nothing but just animal shelter. And then I have in front of me the Public Works building, all the damage that's taken place there. That we ask our engineers and the people from FEMA to come in and look at all the damage that's taken place, and just putting this back to form. That's how we got those numbers. Okay.
Thank you. And as far as order in which we're going to do this, is there an order been set up? Are we going to start with the $6 million complex baseball, or are we going to start with buildings?
My understanding is there is no order at this time. When the city manager brought forward the proposal to put out several contracts at one time as far as bringing in various architects, engineers, was so that we could do more of a circular, in other words, we could be building several different things at one time instead of doing a linear process. But I don't think that's been, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of where we were. And I just wanted to look for just once on the anticipated FEMA funds. These are not all obligated at this time. Is that correct? They're in the process, but they're not all obligated right at this
The
moment.
one that is obligated is the one on the Bailey
The
Bridge.
is the only one at this
That's
point.
obligated.
So, So, and that, going back, that's one of my favorite things because that was one of in the early FEMA meetings, this is actually the mayor's deal, the Bailey Bridge, because I brought up the fact about the tidal surge and they didn't realize the city had that bridge as our property. So that, I feel really good about that. But I wanted to look back at the anticipated FEMA funds and keep in mind that we may or may not get those. I think it looks good that we will. But I think that maybe those funds we need to keep in the back of our head, that those could be things that as we decide the order of this, that maybe those funds would be, we're thinking about how those will be spent down the road, not on the first. And then I wanted to call attention to the insurance. The first insurance payment, if you remember, that we got in December was placed in general fund by former city manager, so that money is not available anymore. So our insurance money that's available right now is, if I did it correctly on my phone calculator, is $8,681,000. Is in general speaking terms. You can correct. I know we've put money back in different areas, but basically the insurance money that we had available is different than. I'm not saying it's not there, but it's different. But where I was going with that is that we have, let's just say that we have the 9 million, wherever we've moved those funds back in from. If we have the 9.5, those monies in insurance are not restricted by FEMA as to how they can be used or what we build. We can build without FEMA restrictions on that. And then the other monies that have come in from the restoration account, based on whether they're a 428 or whatever those we've allocated, those have more restrictions on them. So as we're deciding these prices and looking forward, keep in mind that 99 million, almost $10 million of this is insurance money, which is unrestricted by FEMA, that we can do that any way we want to. So just want to point that out. If we wanted to separate out some projects, is what I'm saying.
Mayor, if I could speak to the 428, I agree with what city manager was saying. I think that one of the things to do is look at the buildings that we can narrow down the cost. The ones that aren't being utilized maybe as much as some of the others, and move some of the funds. I think on 428 you can move the funds within like projects, so you can move it from building to building as long as it's buildings. And I think we can put more money towards the buildings. In other words, that will be used by the public heavily on a day-to-day basis, and pull that 428 from the other things that are not. So just an idea for us to try to bulk up some of the big building funds that we have.
And that is very true. Even on our call the other day, we did ask about if we finished the Bailey Bridge and we had money left over, could we move that money to the city hall? And the answer was yes, we can do that.
But if I may also add, you can't just decide in advance that you're going to move the money. You have to finish one before you
have
can
to
move it to
finish
the other.
project.
Okay.
Yes, you have to totally
That's,
finish.
I
the
was
pro-
just stating
Yes,
that,
ma'am.
that,
Yes, ma'am.
that we have to do that.
Yes. And then you do a scope of work, and then that is approved, and then that money will be available for you to use on another project.
Are there other questions from the commission? Or ideas, proposals?
Well, my question would become this, Mayor, if you don't mind. How do we give the design teams guidance if, let's take the senior or the complex, the sports complex as an example. We've got $6 million down here is what the city manager would like to see spent out there. And you decide, or we decide down the road to direct more money to the sports complex. How do we give them direction now to what to design? I'm confused at how we're going to do this then. My opinion is I think we need to come up with a hard number and go with that number. If we end up with extra money, we could always use it to do something else. Because if we give them guidance and say, go build the park at $6 million, 4 months from now, we go to them and say, hey, listen, we got an extra $2 million. Now just stop the design process. We got to go refigure what to do with that extra $2 million. At least that's the way I see it. I'm kind of at a loss to what number we need to give them on each item.
I think it's a very complicated process, and which is one reason I was pointing out that insurance money doesn't have such restrictions on it as you're looking, because FEMA does, and FEMA. I certainly don't want to make FEMA angry at us, but they have changed the playbook. I've been at the table with them since October the 11th of 2018, long before many people were here. They received their new FEMA handbook 4 days before Hurricane Michael hit. So everybody that was sent here to deal with us had a different playbook in their mind. And there were different FEMA representatives. Some were really, really good and really engaged with the city, and some were not. And so their new handbook has 78 pages of nothing but acronyms. Just acronyms to explain what they do. So it's been a long process, and I think that it bothers me to tell somebody in advance exactly how much I'm going to spend, because it's kind of like being the seller of a house and letting the buyer know what your bottom number is before you get there. I don't know that that's the best way to go to it. So anybody want to comment on that?
Well, Mayor, based on what Commissioner Russell and you just said, and the short experience I've had with our dealings with construction, we put out for bid on King Griffin Park, and then all our eyes were open when the bids came in, and they were much higher than what we originally budgeted. So, we can say a number, and then the bids are going to come back what they're going to come back. So we're that's a little game that, we ended up on the short end of the stick on the last time. So, if we capped our buildings at a certain dollar per square foot, and then we put the bid out on the sports complex in the phases, we'd see what, hopefully it would fall in line in a range. So we would have to have a budget range more so on the sports complex, and a hard and fast dollar amount per square foot on the buildings. So that's what I'm perceiving from what we're talking about. So if we can get to going on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may. Commissioner Purnell, I agree with you to some extent. The problem with the sports complex is you're right about the fields, but do we build one gym or two gyms?
Right.
Do we add a community center or not do we add a community center? All of those are items that we need to tell these guys, hey, listen, scratch the community center because we can't afford it. That needs to come out. That's $6-7 million we don't have. So
Right.
that's where I think we need to get some guidance.
But that's why we should have a phase 1, phase 2 with certain things in it, and then get the bids on it, and then we come back and decide what we want to build, and we'll actually hear from potential builders that way with accurate numbers. you know, so we can set a window, but until they come back, you know, we're not gonna know, but.
Mayor, if I may, one more thing I want to
ahead,
point out.
please.
I had a meeting yesterday with the city manager, and we talked a little bit about, well, actually quite a bit about this. And one of the things that infuriates me is our insurance, and I'm sure y'all have talked to her too about this. You know, we've to date received, according to these numbers, 9.5 million. Our policy limit's 23 million, and we capped out our policy. You know, so I'm at a point now where I told her yesterday, I said, I think this commission needs to direct the city to sue our insurance company. You know, if they're not going to pay, if they're not going to, you know, in good faith sit down with us, and I mean, they're not even at half of what our policy limit is.
I thought we had already started that process.
We have started that process, and we are in just retaining legal counsel has moved us a long ways, and legal counsel has said, let them handle it at a negotiation level instead of going out and suing them first, because I have seen a lot of progress.
Okay. Well, I'm an impatient person, and I think
I'm not
now.
optimistic about our insurance company. I'm not at all, because of all the dealings over the past 2 years. They've not been forthcoming.
Unfortunately, I think we've all seen that with Hurricane Michael. I mean, a lot of us individuals have had to
Yes.
sue our insurance companies too, and it's a sad situation. So,
Let me ask this or put this out there if I can. So that we can give our architects something to go off of. You know, I understand that we need to look at removing buildings this side or the other. It's based on the amount of money we want to spend. In order to at least get something going, why can't we look at our numbers for each project and say, okay, I think if we were 50% less on this dollar amount, I would feel more comfortable. Let them go take out the buildings, work the fields, that's what they do, and come back and say, okay, now we're right around this number, this is what it looks like. And, you know, at least at that point, we're kind of meeting everybody's goals. We're not at a hard number, we're just at a percentage difference at that point, which can change, you know, as we get more money or less money or whatever the facts may be. But I just wanted to throw that out there for the commission and for the architects. If we did something like that, if we said, look, 30% cheaper on the city hall, you know, around 30%.
Right.
I'm sure you guys could go back and shave 30% off. If you quote things like I do, you go through every item, see what the cost is, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sure you can go through and shave some of it or look at some of it.
Did you just say 30% you were sure they could do? I didn't see any of them
No,
nod.
I was using a generic number. Yeah, that wasn't an actual number. I just said, for example, for our lawyer that's not here right now, you know, any percentage, whatever we come up with. But that gives us a starting point. It gives us a starting point to say, here's where we want to be, you know, as opposed to where we are. Otherwise, we can keep kicking this ball around. I mean, I don't know.
the only thing that scares me about that is that City Hall and the PD were 17 million. Is that what would have came back out?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and the sports came back, I think, came back more than that. You know, so that's 35 million.
It was all around 40, I think.
Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, and that's 30%.
We're
Still
loo-
even
we're
getting
looking
us
at
close to where we need to
50%,
be. You
yeah.
need to be at 50% less,
If,
you know.
if I could unearth, I guess call it digging up bones from the last meeting, just hear me out for a moment. The reason I was pointing out that insurance is not held to the same guidelines because FEMA does not like the design build concept. But the school board is now going forward with a design build concept. They're seeking solicitations for 3 of their buildings because it is the most cost effective and you get a bottom line price without change orders. You get all the way up to 60 to 75% of the design before you have to complete all of your thoughts. We had, and let me just clarify for Commissioner Aldridge and Commissioner Russell, I'm under no way pushing Phoenix Construction. They're just the ones who brought forth the proposal to us. But they brought forth a proposal to build, to first of all, include 5 new acres of land, to build the police, the EOC, give us money to expand our public works, build a library, demolish the old library if we wanted it demolished, and to harden the old city hall or demolish it at our request for $15.8 million. So that caught my eye and offered to finance at 2% any portion of it. So if you had $8 million, $9 million, whatever of that already in insurance that you could go toward that and then borrow the other 7 at 2%, the city could do that, then you'd have all the FEMA money left with only City Hall and the sports complex to do. Not saying you should go with that particular company, but that company even came and said, let's solicit bids for similar type design build and see if anyone else has a similar proposal, open it up to anybody who wants to bring it. And the other thought side of that is you don't throw the architects out with the bathwater. They've done a lot of work on this. Maybe one of these design teams who solicits a bid from us, or comes solicits a proposal or brings a proposal for us, could work with these architects as part of their team. I mean, they don't have to be kicked out. And these architects would also be, DAG is actually on the sports complex, which is not included in that. And then the other architects, Florida architects, might want to work with whoever the design proposal was. So looking at what the school board's done, looking at the fact that 25 miles of road were paved in Lynn Haven in 2017 and 18 in like less than a year using design build, I just think it's worth looking at. And so with that, I won't say another word about design build.
Mayor, I'm never opposed to looking at anything. You know that. I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to any ideas. But I would like to find out from the school board, because you're right, FEMA doesn't like those very much. And from my understanding, the school board has had a very hard time getting funding or funds from FEMA because
This is not about FEMA. This is using our insurance money. That's what I said. So go ahead.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just, okay.
So FEMA shouldn't be involved in what I just said at all. I'm saying use the insurance money to do that part. And then all we'd have left would be the city hall and the sports complex. Florida architects could maybe continue on with the city hall, and DAG would go ahead with the sports complex, and they'd have all this FEMA money to work with under FEMA.
428, so I mean, they would have to release those funds to us.
It can be done.
Okay.
I mean, FEMA will work as long as you're within FEMA guidelines. FEMA does not like working with design, build, and insurance money, but they have nothing to say about that. But you would have all those monies released. That's just, I think it's a great thought.
Mayor, if I may, and I'm not discounting, what you're saying, but after the sour taste I got in my mouth over King Griffin, and I know y'all are all aware of we budgeted $3 million, put it out for bid, came back at 5.7. We ended up getting at 3.5 through the work of, some hard work of some individuals. I would be more leaning toward wanting to do a qualified low bid, guaranteed low bid, or I'm sorry, a qualified.
That's what it is.
A qualified guaranteed maximum price.
That's what a design build includes.
The problem I've got with that is how do you give a price on a design when you don't have a design to give a price on? That's what I don't understand. I mean, a contractor can.
They bring to you what you ask for, and then you have the option to change to tell them, no, I don't want it this way, I want it this way, and you move along. I mean, I've been through that with the paving process in Lynn Haven. It worked. But let's go back to the discussion, and I'll back out. I just want the public to be aware that I brought this forward, so I've said it. That's what the mayor thinks we ought to do, and the rest of y'all go ahead and I'll be quiet.
Mayor, RFQ and design build, can someone explain the difference to me there?
RFQ is like the request for the quality. It's the proposal is different. I'll even let, if maybe Chris Forehand, if you can put it into engineering terms, I'll let you help. But soliciting a design build is different than asking for an RFP or an RFQ.
Commissioner
Okay.
Russell, were you talking about an RFQ?
Thank you.
No,
it's different.
No, I'm
No.
talking about us having a design and then putting out for a guaranteed maximum price by qualified bidder.
So what would be the difference between the two? If you?
That's what I'm asking
Yeah.
Mr. Forehand,
Yeah.
because he can
Okay.
delineate it in the correct verbiage so that everybody gets it.
Okay, so there's several different delivery methods that you can do. They're all approved by the state, but you can have what they call a request for qualifications to hire a team that consists of a contractor, an architect, and an engineer. And you select them based on qualifications. And then you go and you approve a fee for them to design up to 60% plans. And then once you approve those 60% plans, then they give you a guaranteed maximum price not to exceed that amount.
And that's what I'm talking about.
And it's a two-step process. And I think that's what the mayor is trying to achieve. There's other type design build delivery methods where you have the same teaming arrangement, but you hire another consultant to write a design build criteria package. And then each one of those teams bids on that work based on the design build criteria package. So you get the low bid option that you're talking about. You just don't go through that process of doing the 60% and then the 100% plans. Like for instance, the courthouse that they're doing right now, the juvenile justice courthouse, the first method I mentioned to you is the way they're doing that.
Thank you very much for helping me with my English major verbiage there.
Mayor, can I just clarify a couple of things with the money here? The insurance money and the FEMA money, that FEMA money that's come back to us, all of that money belongs to us. That's money we have spent and we have been reimbursed and we can use any way we want to. So we have a total of $18 million. That's money that's already been spent. It came out of our pockets. And the only thing they did was reimburse us for that money. These anticipated funds here, those are a little bit different. And you're going to have to use them on that project, close out that project, and move to the next project when they're 428 projects. And so I just wanted to make sure that we understood that that's money that we have saved after, and it's really been through, we paid out, they reimbursed us, debris, all of those things that's come out of our pocket, and that we can now save that money for rebuild.
Thank you for clarifying that
Yes,
for everyone. Other thoughts?
Do we need to come up with an order in which, or some kind of
Well,
order?
it's a workshop, and so what
Okay.
we're trying to do is just get everyone's thoughts out, and then any member of the commission can ask for something to be put on the agenda. Like if there's a way that you're leaning that we could, to get it to the point that we have a motion or, that the commission moves forward on something. But today is just so that everyone has a chance to speak what they think should be done. Or to think about what should be done. Maybe no one knows what we should do yet,
Well, since the beginning, I've been against change order. So any guaranteed bottom line, I would be all for. Because I think change orders have eaten us alive.
Commissioner Tender, I understand what you're saying, and I can't necessarily disagree. I'm not sure how we'll hit that goal. I mean, no one ever builds something and stops at $0. It just never works that way.
No, I mean a guaranteed, like, and I'll bring it up,
Right.
Phoenix Construction,
Mhm.
15 million, that's it. Not one change order that's not going to come out at 20 million or whatever. I remember bidding out part of this ball field last year, and what we said, and I'm making up numbers because I hate numbers, but like we said, okay, we've got 4 million to spend, and they came back with 6 million, and it was even more drastic than that. So I'm all for give us this, it costs this, and it's not going to exceed that. And if some unforeseen thing happens, then I think we back down a little bit. We don't just keep spending and go over it. We'll cut off 10 square feet.
Yeah, something else
Whatever.
that worries me with that is inflation's coming. I mean, there's no question inflation's coming. That's what happens when you print trillions of dollars. In other words, things are going to get more expensive. So the more time goes by, the more months that go by, the more it's going to cost for anything, fuel, lumber, roof shingles, whatever it may be. So I do feel somewhat of
Urgency.
an urgency, yes, to at least get this ball rolling
Right.
before it gets.
And I
problem.
agree with you there because, and here's something else that I'd like to cut off this fat, and I know we can't, probably. But it seems like we hire people at hundreds of thousands of dollars to go represent us and to sit at a table and go, well, what do you think? We should make this, $500,000 or whatever. And we end up paying them $1 million just to sit around and talk. I realize designing and all that, they have to do that. But I'm personally not for hiring somebody who's going to hire somebody else that's going to create a big committee, and we've blown $1 million of this 18 that we have to spend right off the top before we can even talk about building anything. So I think we should be conservative there too.
I think another thought too would be because so that staff doesn't have any negativity thrown toward them every time something doesn't go well. is that there would be, for each of the buildings, for each of the things that are being redone, as we decide on them, maybe have one commissioner to sit in that committee with staff to bring the commission's views back as it progresses, instead of just having staff bring a completed project and then everybody throws their hands up and goes, oh my God, what have you done? So maybe a commissioner to sit in, if not at every meeting, but just, periodically to see where those plans are going and to bring those, to bring that back to the commission meeting to talk about, or to a workshop, so.
And that brings me to a question. How did we come up with these numbers for, like, the library, senior center? How did we arrive at those numbers?
So
Mrs. Gaynor, go
some of these numbers here are pretty much sound in terms of I've gotten, like, for instance, the animal shelter. I have a pricing for that. I think it was $465. I took off some of the stuff we've already done for the roof, and went down to 400,000. The facility maintenance, I think was at 431. Well, we know that we can go in and do the facility maintenance very cheap. We can actually do that in-house. The only thing we will need is really the design and the structure, but Joe can do that in-house. We've already found that number there. Recreation and sports complex, we went off of some of the prices that we had before, and we put that number in there. It may be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. The 2.71 that you see down here, that is just sports complex, gymnasium, and administration. That is not including the ball fields. We have not even gotten our final cost estimates for the ball fields yet. And just remember, what we're doing for Ken Griffin Park, we'll get reimbursed for a lot of that because, again, we are spending the money. When that money comes back, that money belongs to us because it's already been put out.
Right.
You were going to have a call.
I was gonna, because I was making it even more simple than that. 400,000 for the animal shelter. I guess what I'm asking is, how did we come to that 400,000, and where did those numbers come from? Like, you need a new crematory. I assumed you called a crematory company, but we don't have bids yet or anything.
If I could add with city manager just for a moment with your question.
Sure.
In the very beginning, before we ever got to this point, even with this commission and this city manager, the staff who were living in the tents out here with the FEMA had to come up with damages that were done and what it would cost to replace. We had to provide receipts. They made, and Ms. Higbee was one of the major ones, Mr. Kidwell back there, and Mr. Baker, several others. They had to go through the buildings in detail down to the paper clips to list what was destroyed
Yes,
and what
I'm
was
sorry.
lost. And so some of those costs originated there, and then the staff has now added on to that. So
Yes.
Gotcha.
So this including contents, everything, whatever it would take to
Right.
rebuild this building here. So
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Perno, more thoughts?
No, I just think that we just need to put a dollar amount on our buildings, and we need to come up with the sports complex project and go from there. But I like what you said about design build, and and we have money that at our discretion. So that's our dilemma right now, I think. So that's wheels are turning there. So we need to probably put it on the agenda and make a decision one way or another at our next meeting. So, well, which way we're going to go. So.
And Mr. Jenke had his hand up, and he would like to say something. And also the rest of the staff, if you have comments to add here, please do. Please ask.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ben Jenke, Economic Development Director, City of Lynn Haven. I would be certainly open to the design build option and kind of look into this a little bit further. However, I would advise against using the Highway 390 property for government use. The moment we do this, we're essentially taking this property off the tax roll, and we're also removing one vacant commercial property from the market. We already have a shortage of commercial properties here in Lynn Haven, so I just wanted to mention this.
Appreciate that input.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience or the staff? More commissioner input. Mr. Walker, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a slight question. I overheard something. I did Are we
Tilt the
obligated-
microphone for us, please. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
I had this discussion with Commissioner Aldridge there. I had a question about, I understood that we went under a change of direction with the architects. And then I understand $1 million is being floated out. Are we under contract with the architects for $1 million as we stand right now?
We have two different architectural firms, Florida Architects and DAG Architects, which the commission approved, and they have certainly done work up to this point. I do not know the dollar amount of the work they've done to this point, and that was the point that I was making earlier, that I think that even if the commission were to move forward and change course for part of the buildings, not necessarily all of them, that it doesn't mean that you would be throwing out what's already been done. The proposal that I had brought forward based on the ideas that were given did not even include what this group of architects has done, and there's nothing saying if we went with design build on some of those other buildings that Florida Architects has done that they might not be part of the team. So those are just thoughts. So, but I don't know the dollar amount. City manager may have some.
We have not done it simply because we have not been able to get to a number in order to finish out our contract, the contract with these architects.
So we don't know the number.
So we've not been presented an invoice.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
You're welcome. Anything else from the commission? Are we worn down?
Yeah, is Tetra Tech here, Ms. Gaynor?
No.
Can we make sure they're at the next meeting? I mean, they're waist deep in this stuff every single day. I'd like to get some of their advice and insight on dealing with the state and federal government as well, because it can be a nightmare sometimes. They can red tape you up. So I just want to make sure we're getting the best advice from our team.
I can tell you that everything, once we sign a contract with these architects, everything that they do is reimbursable. I can tell you that.
Is that no matter what they charge? No matter how much it is?
Exactly. It's reimbursable.
Another question I have, I guess, Ms. Gaynor, and Mayor, if that's okay.
Yes, please go ahead, but I didn't quite get that last comment. I got to go back to that. Go ahead. From city manager. Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask if, can we use, another question for Tetra Tech, can we use Cat Z funds to try to get some help on the building projects? You know, when you have Cat Z, you have
Administrative.
reimbursable administrative, right? So I'm thinking that, you know, this is a very heavy project, so to speak, if we're going to go back to the 80s, right? It's very heavy right now, and I think that it would be helpful to maybe have a couple extra hands that will be reimbursed by the federal government, you know, to help us in this storm recovery. It's something that maybe we should toss around or talk to Tetra Tech about. I just want to put that out there.
Yes. Once we get on board and we decide what we want to do, that will be under the Cat Z category as administrative cost that we will be able to get reimbursed for.
So let's go back to the statement that FEMA will reimburse anything, any cost that the architects incur up to, that was left out. There's not an open end with FEMA of what they will reimburse, and that's what that statement sounded like to the public and to this commission, I think.
No, I think whatever that contract is and whatever that they charge us and we pay out, we will be reimbursed from that. I verified that with Tetra Tech.
That we pay out in advance.
Yes, ma'am.
So we need to, oh, sorry.
But there are still some guidelines. In other words, FEMA will reimburse the city up to a point. In other words, the city hall that we had sitting there that was destroyed, okay, they'll reimburse us for whatever it would cost to put that back,
That's exactly.
plus with whatever new wind provisions or federal or state guidelines are there. But they will not reimburse us with an unlimited budget to put a city hall there.
No, ma'am.
Okay, that's what that sounded like to the
No,
public.
she
to
was
say.
talking about the architects in terms of what they would, their cost, of what they would cost to design it.
But
What-
that's, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that still falls under the same thing. If the architectural fees to build a building that's $7 million, which is kind of what we had talked about in the beginning, were a certain amount, the FEMA is not going to reimburse us for an unlimited amount of architectural fees on a build. I don't think that's a good statement. I don't interpret that the same way, I don't think. FEMA is not going to give us an unlimited amount of money to spend.
anything that incurs while we're trying to rebuild the city, we will be able to turn it in for reimbursement. That is what I was
We can turn it in.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
We can turn it in, but we don't guarantee that we get it reimbursed. I agree to disagree again, so. I didn't mean that to sound
Yeah, that's fine.
antagonistic, because it wasn't. But FEMA will not give this city an unlimited budget. There's no guarantee. FEMA will only replace what we've lost that we have paid. I'll just leave it there. They-
Mayor, if
We
I
don't have,
may?
we don't have an unlimited financial dream from FEMA.
Mayor, if I may, I just have a question for Mr. Forehand.
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
He loves it.
we talked about you just came up here and explained the two different versions of proposals.
Yes, sir.
So is there any way that we can get a parameter from you on the two different ways with what we know our numbers are right now, where it would tighten things up a little bit?
Well, you were talking about the fees earlier, and I just want to comment on that while I'm up here. FEMA actually has a cost estimating form that Tetra Tech will help you use.
That's
And
right.
So, when whoever the firm is, whenever they're doing work for you, when they provide you that fee, it cannot
Yes.
exceed what
Right.
FEMA would allow for that cost
Right.
estimating. So that's an easy thing to check that Tetra Tech's already going to be doing for you.
Yes.
But in terms of the delivery method, that's just something you all have to decide how you want to do that. I think maybe there was some opinions that were formed by Tetra Tech on how you could do those delivery methods if something was reimbursed by FEMA. And if you remember, the FEMA pays for whatever the insurance doesn't pay. So if you had $1 million in coverage on the city hall, and the value of it comes up to be 1.2, then FEMA pays 90% of that difference, okay? So it really depends on what you get from insurance as to how much money you get from FEMA. Keep in mind that like on the parks, a lot of that's not covered by your insurance.
That's right.
So that's where you really
Really
need
get
FEMA money.
That's
Okay.
exactly right.
So the buildings is kind of
But
really just-
we're talking about unrestricted insurance money that we can put to an entire project if we need to. as
And
far
that
as
was my
what-
point. If we use the insurance money on buildings that FEMA was giving us, that we could have all the
then
FEMA money to go to
would-
the parks
FEMA
and
would
the
come-
sports complex.
But if we did a project and used unrestricted insurance money, would FEMA reimburse on that? Or would they just, that,
Well, we've already received the insurance
Right.
reimbursement.
right.
Well, I think you said you've received $9.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a question you ask. Next time you meet with your FEMA rep, just say, hey, look, this is what we're thinking about. This is, what we'd like to do. What are your thoughts? Can we take whatever money we're gonna get from you for this building, do a 428 and use it on something else? So
Yeah.
whatever money you're gonna get on whatever maybe you wanted to do a design build for, you might transfer that, do a 428 and use it on another project.
Yes, and that was the meeting we had last week specifically for this meeting here. So,
And Chris, do you know design builds are generally tied to procurement to the liking of FEMA?
Well, the design build methods that I talked about are approved by the state. They're a state statute form of delivery method that public bodies can use.
I'm just talking about in your experience of dealing with FEMA. You deal with multiple municipalities and stuff. I know that
With FEMA, I've never dealt with that.
you never dealt with the design build procurement process. Okay.
And again, that's the point. If you're not using FEMA funds, the design build is coming out of insurance. So I've said that several times, but apparently it's still not ringing true on the table here. But there I go.
I like what you're saying. We could take a whole project, get it out, carve it out, use the insurance money, and then go back in and still get reimbursed.
And I think ultimately that would give more money towards the sports complex and some of the other things that we're questioning about.
If we do that, I want to put out there that we make sure we touch base and get the advisement of Tetra Tech and FEMA, because again, I deal with these people a lot. They're not crazy about this process. I'm just telling you.
What
we
part
decide to
of
do-
insurance? Okay, I'm going to say this one more time, and I'm just going to say I know this is a little antagonistic, but it's almost at the last meeting and now again, there's this little in between the lines, like maybe this is not quite legal, maybe this is something not quite the way we should be doing it. There's a Florida statute. It is a total approved method of delivery. There's nothing underhanded about it. So
No,
there we go.
and that thread is not there. The thread is I've been fighting since I've been on this board for a year to try to get money coming in. We got money coming in, and I know for a fact because I've talked to these people, they're not crazy about that idea. I'm sorry if we don't like it, but that's the truth. It came out of the horse's mouth.
It came from Tetra Tech, who is our consultant, who I've been sitting at the table with 2 years before you got here.
This did not come from Tetra Tech. Thank you. That being said, I just want us to be safe. I want us to be careful. That's all. FEMA can hold, the state and FEMA can hold money. That's all I'm saying. Let's do it however we want, however this board votes. I'm game. I'm not throwing rocks at anybody. I'm just saying let's be careful. They're stringent with things.
I just want to know if you could whittle cost spreader between one of the two delivery methods.
Well, there is advantages to design build. It gets the designers and the contractors together. So you just have to make that decision as a board, which way you want to go.
Didn't we
I
try
suggest
this?
talking to some of the cities and talk to the county. Talk
And
to
the school board,
district, School
yeah.
board, and talk to them about what their experience has been, each one of you, and then
I
make
think
that
one
decision.
of our architects, come on up, sir. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate your valuable information.
We're working with several projects with Bay District Schools, and I'll give you an example. The Jinx Middle School gym that y'all saw on the news, where it's basically construction management.
Yes.
And what we're working with Allstate Construction on that. What they did is they interviewed several contractors and they selected a construction manager. And then what we did is we provided 50% drawings to Allstate. They priced it, and then as we move forward, they updated their estimate, and then at the end, they did give a guaranteed maximum price, and then when they went out to the market and I believe they tried to get 5 prices for every component of the building. So that's kind of how Bay District is working. It's kind of a CM agreement.
Yep.
And we're doing the same thing with Haney and Tyndall right now. I think they're in the process of selecting construction managers. So you basically be the same process that we'll give them a set of drawings, and we'll talk to them up front, even during schematics. Say this is what we're looking at. Give us a ballpark number. So what we would do with y'all is at each phase, like schematic design, we would have some input from the contractor. We give you kind of an idea. No, we're too high, we're too low, and then we would go make some adjustments, mid-course adjustments. We'd go to design development, add more detail. The contractors would have their input. So they're involved all the way through the process. And so at the end, and to say that you don't have change orders, you always have potential of change orders, because as you add more and more detail, they may have one idea that, we didn't have that figured in, but at least you have the communication going through the whole process. So it's worked well.
And wouldn't you say that the change orders basically come though from the source? In other words, that changes the school board might want to incorporate, or changes
Yeah,
the
no,
city might want. It's not so
you-
much the contractor coming back.
You are correct. A lot of times the owner will make changes in scope, and that's where a lot of them do come from. Yeah.
Thank you, and we appreciate you coming up and saying
Sure.
that. Yes, sir.
Hi, Antonio Desi, Florida Architect.
Yes.
Well, a couple of things I would like to clarify. The courthouse actually hired a design consultant to
Could
write
you
the criteria.
lift the microphone a
Yeah.
little bit, sir? Thank you.
The courthouse
Thank
project
you.
had design criteria before they did design and build. It's usually preferred in the Florida statute to have that. So that the moment that you have design and build teams coming up and bidding for the job, they all present based on the same design criteria. Because otherwise, you'll be making decisions with apples, bananas, and God knows what, maybe even a Chevy pickup truck put in there. So at that point, to make clear, first thing, architects get paid on percentage of the total cost. The scope of work, you determine what is the construction estimate. We do not set the market for what the construction cost is. There is a big difference between professional services and construction services. That's why we've not defined our contract. Right now, we're just dealing with the master plan. That is a matter of what is the city vision, what you want to see for the future of our generation and generations to come. That's why right now we're in the funnel phase of this project. We've not done a huge amount of shaving because we're still discussing in our vision. We're having a conversation, and then, what happened in the last few weeks, where this conversation has not had much progress. But other than that side, I will really appreciate if we try to keep the conversation very strict and clear to the point in defining each single step. I think the mayor has a very good point. If you have insurance money, design and build, it is an option. It is a good way to get value. The only problem with that will be to have design criteria so that you make sure that you can make an educated decision and you just don't have to pick out things randomly because it will be impossible to have a linear decision process or create a matrix to make a decision then to report to public. That will be just my 2 cents in it. On the other side, in the design process, we start with a very broad net when we're doing master planning, and we keep refining that process. Now, I know the mayor keeps talking about the school board. To give an example, we're doing the Fine
That was
Arts
just
Center.
one example.
No, and it's a very good one because they're really aggressive and they're trying to maximize their FEMA claims and they're trying to deliver the best value for our community. I mean, it's a great example. So the idea that the school board has many times is to go with a GMP price. So we end up designing things, and we gave them a concept for the Fine Arts Center almost 2 years ago that was about 27,000 square feet. Through the different phases of design, we're now in schematic design, we're actually 23,000 square feet. But we added 110 seats to the project. So we're actually delivering way more than what they expected to start with. We're actually still 4,000 square feet below. And we added a classroom too. So, I mean, it is meant to be a conversation that moves on. The plans are supposed to change. It's ink on paper. It's not yet concrete in the ground. So that means that we have to take every single possible effort to make sure that the taxpayer money always gets to where it needs to be, not just for this moment, but for many years to come. Because we're building a city back. We're building a city hall back that, in my opinion, is the center of a community. And that's all that we want to make sure that we deliver. At the same time, I think for all of us, we just need to keep our hands very clean and be very straightforward in communication. And it will be nice if, sometimes we'll make sure that what we're saying, it's appropriate across the table, because I feel that, many times I was itching to say, well, that's not really what the architect does. This is what the builder does. But other than that, I think it's very helpful that we have workshops so that we can, make things clear on both sides of the table and hopefully move forward. I'm very concerned about your comment, Commissioner Aldridge. It is true. Time runs out. You have additional costs. You have inflation. You have rental costs. I mean, that one is definitely a factor. And by the idea of actually looking in all different pockets of money that you have and establish goals and be aggressive at it, I think it needs to be looked at. I mean, it's definitely a great opportunity for the city to build back, and it will be wasteful of our time and abilities and funds that are available now not to take the best advantage possible. So from our side, we're working pretty much without a contract right now because we're waiting on you to determine a possible budget. But anyway, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Summed it up.
Have we talked this out, or I don't know if we have or not. Any proposals for a continued discussion, or just maybe think about it and bring some items to the next agenda for possible action?
I think, Mayor, if I may, I think everybody's kind of just letting all this absorb. Yeah, I can see his wheels are turning and there's smoking over here. And maybe we should come back to the next meeting and with an answer. I mean, with something that we're going to try to do. But I don't feel, if I may just say this, I don't feel like we've really resolved anything this
No.
morning. I mean,
And I
we
don't know
haven't.
that that was the purpose.
Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know that it was either. But I mean, I feel like if we need to come up with the order that we want to build in, we need to come up with a method that we're going to build in. We need to make sure that we have the funds to build with. I mean, it's so multifaceted. Kind of like what Commissioner Perno said, if we take a square foot and let's see what we can, buy for that amount of money. If it's way off or whatever, then we need to readjust. But I think something has to happen. If not right now, at least at the next meeting, we've got to make a decision. Even if it's to start with one building, start with one building.
At least $1 per square foot comes close. I mean, at the square footage of the Panama City Beach buildings, we're at $10.2 million at $300 a square foot. So, I mean, I think you had 11 or whatever down there, but we got something to shoot at to give them a budget. So on the city buildings, now the whole the project for the sports complex and whatnot. I mean, that's a dollar amount that we need to figure out how we're going to do the delivery on and go from there. So. I just hope we can put something on the agenda to pick that, so to pick which delivery we're going to do and go forward. So,
While we're all sitting here together, could I just throw out a couple of things and see what your thoughts are? What if we had on the next agenda, first of all, to discuss delivery methods? And that doesn't mean we have to choose one. There can be more than one delivery method on various buildings. What if we had on the agenda, the mayor feels, and I'm sure that you probably do too, in light of the current climate that we're living in, I think it's very important that our police department have a hardened facility where where they can be safe, where their equipment is safe, where it's secure. I think police department is, and then we're moving into hurricane season. The EOC, I think, is extremely important. So, to me, police department, EOC, City Hall, I think that's the core of our priority at this point. I'm not saying that senior center and all that's not important, but I know we're working on that. We've already got all that going. And then, so if we could come up with our delivery methods, which funds are going where, and then look at coming up with our idea of City Hall, Police Department, EOC, Chambers, that get that out of the way, and then see where we go from there. That's my thoughts. And again, I know that because of the comments that I have made after hearing proposals for design build, I know I've probably offended, not meaning to, architectural firms. I haven't meant to do that. I think the architectural firms that we've already contracted with could very easily be part of most of this, if not all of this. I don't think there's any reason, I think there's a way to integrate all this, but I think we need to get moving. We're almost 2 years after the storm, and I'd like to see us, digging some dirt and turning some shovels out there. So that's my thoughts. If anyone else would like to make some concluding remarks, the floor is open.
Mayor, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
And it's no disrespect to you or anything like that, but, the same with the community center. I don't think we need to be looking at a community center. I don't think we need to be looking at an EOC right now. We didn't have one prior to the storm. I think we need to build back what we've got, and then if there's money left over, build an EOC with what money we have left over.
And I'm in agreement with that, except for the fact that I know the design that they're looking at, I think the police department wanted the EOC incorporated in that facility, is why I said EOC. So, I mean, I'm certainly amenable or open to that. We have the county EOC, but we have to leave the city when we do that. So
you mean the EOC built into the PD building, not a separate building?
or adjacent and connected, whatever we decide upon. But I mean, it's one and the same as far as I'm concerned. The police and the fire department and our first responders need a hardened facility. So if it's one and the same, or I think that's we're not at odds on that at all. I don't think.
And I think me and you both are. I think would go to bat for
Yeah.
for the hardened building, but based on what they went through. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else? Anything from the public for the good of Mrs. Gaynor?
We just want some direction so we can start building and rebuilding.
Okay, well, we can't take action at the
Yeah,
workshop.
I know,
We'll
I
have
know.
to, so the next meeting,
I know.
hopefully we can come to some decisions, some hard decisions, and get moving. And we appreciate the input from everyone today. All right?
May I ask
Yes,
one more
please go
question?
ahead.
I just want to ask Florida Architects real quick. Do you see it feasible that we get that number down to the $11 million price?
Go ahead, sir.
You're saying keeping the scope as it is
No,
right
no,
now?
obviously, they would, but can you foresee us reducing the scope to get it to the $11 million price?
That will be, nothing is undoable, but definitely.
It'll be hard.
It will be very hard. I mean, it will be definitely a hard task. Now, the EOC component, it's within the building footprint. So it is truly a function that is added, but you can think about it as an enhancement of the police station versus a different module that is added to it. Hardening the exterior walls, I mean, it's the main cost to it. Then the square footage comes at a lower price. So if that makes sense. So at that point, it's just the convenience of having something that is fully integrated, the one into the other. And because, I mean, I'm sure you had heard many stories about how the EOC operated and the pressure that they had within the facility and the number of people that were actually part and active in it. So that's why the chief was making the recommendation if he can have its own EOC. And also, if you think about it from a community point of view, the moment the internet was down at the EOC, I mean, communications were shut down. You have a second point. We become more resilient as a community. We have points of communication that at that point are multiple. There are so many different advantages. In a case of emergency, that we all hope that will never happen again. But just in case if it happens, we want to just make sure that we did our due diligence. We're ready for the next generation.
I have
but-
a little bit of a question to tag on to his, if you don't
Oh, yeah,
mind.
absolutely.
If the police department and the EOC were pulled out of your project and you were the city hall and the chambers, where would you be with that number with what you have now?
Well, we'll have to round them back.
I mean,
those
what would
numbers
you
of
be
the
feasible? I mean, I'm just saying. I asked the same
No, I
question
mean,
he did,
I
but you know,
I
maybe.
think we can work with the $300 a square foot
Yep.
budget, and then at that point, I mean, we'll start running those numbers.
And I agree that the EOC, we need that in Lynn Haven because we do have the bay between us and the other EOC. I was in that building when it blew up, as was Commissioner Russell. And at an EOC, if you're the mayor of the city, if you're the police chief, if you're the fire chief, if you're head of the utilities, you want to stay in the town. You don't want to move to another building. So I do think it's crucial that we have our own, and that and as we grow, that we have
I
it
mean,
here.
we rushed back to town to help, and the school board. I mean, we were doing inspections in the following days. Because, I mean, it is true. I mean, you got to be there. You got to be there right away. You capture so much that is very important information to get started.
And we
making
stayed
a
here
plan.
for months with less than
Yeah, I can imagine.
nothing.
But that's
So-
why, you know, I mean, the professional kitchen and all that that went into it. But I mean, there is still areas that we, as usually 10 to 20% of the area. I mean, and like I said, right now we're just looking at it from a programming and master plan. Usually 10 to 20% shaving in different phases. So we have the programming and master plan. We have the schematic design NDD. We optimize continuously the square footage as we go through.
Okay.
You truly have to think that continuously we're massaging and making the building tighter till we get down to the point where the funnel is now to the only solution that is possible. We
Thank
try
you.
to have a fairly broad. But
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
And I think as we go into the next commission meeting, as we come forward, please call Mrs. Gaynor with your ideas for the agenda. I'm certainly going to give her mine based on what I just said just now. But I think if everyone in the room keeps an open mind, I don't think there's anyone in this process up to this point that has to be excluded from this rebuild. I think it can all come together. I think we can use several methods of delivery. It doesn't have to be linear, and I think we can get it going. So with that, let's end the workshop. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, real quick, I want to show you something if you don't mind.